By definition, arteries take blood away from the heart. They take blood away from the heart. So what we're going to do is review the locations on models, but a lot of this test you're going to find, I'm going to ask you what vessels take blood to a region or to an organ. When I say what type of vessel takes blood to an organ or to a region, it is an artery. So they go away from the heart, but arteries take blood to a region or to an organ. So you'll see many more questions asking you what blood vessel takes blood to the lateral portion of your lower arm, and you're going to need to know that answer. There's a podcast you need to watch or listen to that goes through those locations. It's very important that you go through that. So let's start with the arteries. We're going to go look at your list on your lab packet. This is the top of the heart. This should look familiar. Here's your pulmonary artery. That should be review. This is obviously the aorta. That should also be review. Now what we're going to do is we're going to branch off the aorta. The first branch off the aorta is called the brachiocephalic artery. This is called the brachiocephalic artery. What the brachiocephalic artery will do, it's very short, and there's only one artery. What it'll do is it'll come right off, and then it'll branch, with one branch going to the arm, the other branch going to the head. The branch going to the arm is called the right subclavian, with subclavian meaning below the clavicle. So brachiocephalic comes up, it branches into the subclavian. So if I point to the clavicle on the skeleton and ask you what artery was there, the answer is subclavian. Now, subclavian, brachiocephalic, subclavian here, and then branching up to the head is the common carotid, the right common carotid. With your carotids and your subclavians, you need to know right and left. So brachiocephalic branches into the right subclavian, branches to the head, to the right common carotid. The second branch off the aorta is the left common carotid. So it comes directly up to the head, directly off the aorta to the head. That is the left common carotid. The third branch off the aorta is the left subclavian. So it goes directly to the arm. That is the left subclavian. I guarantee you will see one of these three arteries marked on the next test, and you need to identify them. So brachiocephalic artery, left common carotid, left common carotid, and left subclavian. Brachiocephalic breaks into the right subclavian to the arm and the right common carotid to the head. Now let's finish the trip to the head. Around the lower cerebrum, the cerebrum is the big part of your brain, is what is called the circle of Willis. It's not on this picture. It's called the circle of Willis. Goes to the portion of your brain and supplies the blood supply to that area of the brain. So we've gone from the heart to the aorta, brachiocephalic, right common carotid artery, left common carotid directly off the heart, and then to the circle of Willis to the brain. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down the arms. Okay, we're going to go down the arms. Each arm's going to be the same. So here's your subclavian, here's your subclavian artery. When we get to the armpit area, it is then called the axillary artery. So subclavian, axillary artery. When you get down to the upper arm, it's called the brachial artery. That is a very common artery in which to take a blood pressure. You then get down to the elbow. At the elbow, it splits into the radial and the ulnar artery. Now remember, you're in the anatomical position, so the radial artery is going to be lateral, the ulnar artery is going to be medial. Again, subclavian, axillary artery, brachial artery, radial artery, ulnar artery. So we've done the head, we've done the arm. There's a podcast that goes through those so you can practice pronouncing the words and spelling them. Now what's going to happen is the aorta is going to come down through the abdominal area, and we're going to get branches off that aorta. The first branch is called the renal artery. The renal artery is going to take blood to the kidneys. You can see these on the torso model. The kidneys you should recognize from the first lab, so that's the renal artery. There are then two arteries that are going to take blood to the intestines, and they are called the mesenteric arteries. The mesentery is the connective tissue within the intestines. So the superior mesenteric is going to be higher up than the inferior mesenteric. So if I ask you a question, name a blood vessel that takes blood to the upper portion of the intestines. If you say mesenteric artery, you'll get full credit. Since I said upper intestines, if you say superior, you'll get an extra 2 points. If I ask you what blood vessel takes blood to the lower portion of the intestines, and you say inferior mesenteric, again you'll get an extra 2 points. So superior and inferior mesenteric arteries take blood to the intestines. I will not point to those on a model. All right, then the aorta comes down, and you can see it here, and then it splits to go to each leg. After it splits, it's called the common iliac artery. Remember, this bone is the ilium. So right after the aorta splits, you have the common iliac artery. The iliac artery will then split into the external and internal iliac artery. So common iliac artery, external iliac artery goes here, internal iliac artery goes here, and then stops. And you need to look at that on the torso, and I will show you that in lab. So common iliac artery branches to the external and the internal iliac artery. The external iliac artery is what we will proceed down the leg with. Now when you get to this area, what is that called? It's called the femoral artery. Remember, if you remember your bones, your femur, the femoral artery. When you get to the knee, actually behind the knee, it is called the popliteal artery. The popliteal artery. Then it will split into the anterior tibial artery and the posterior tibial artery. Now, are the tibial arteries going to be medial or lateral? They're going to be medial because the tibia is medial, with the anterior tibial artery being in the front and the posterior tibial artery running down the back of the tibia. Again, on a skeleton, I can put a piece of tape on the tibia in front and ask you what artery is there, or in the back and ask you what artery is located in that region. Make sure you know the difference. Now, the anterior tibial artery comes down, and at the top of your foot is what's called the Dorsalis Pedis artery. It comes off the anterior tibial artery, and it's called the Dorsalis Pedis artery. Remember, dorsal fin on a fish is on the back, so if your foot was a fish, its fin, dorsal fin, would be on the top of your foot. The posterior tibial artery will come down and go into what's called the plantar arch. So we're using a different term than this. It's called the plantar arch. It comes off the posterior tibial artery. If you step down with your foot, you land, you plant your foot, that is the plantar arch. The last artery you need to know, which is not marked on here, is the fibular artery. The fibular artery is going to run on the lateral side of the leg because that's where the bone, the fibula, is located. So again, the tibial arteries are going to be medial. The fibular artery is going to run lateral. So again, I could ask you a question. Name the artery that takes blood, or name the vessel that takes blood to the lateral portion of the lower leg. And your answer would be the fibular artery. So I've covered all the major locations of the arteries. You need to listen to this screencast again, review all the podcasts, and focus on that podcast that goes through where these arteries take blood to, because that will be the typical type of question that you will see on the test. The second screencast you need to watch will go over the vein locations.